going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets here live on our FTN Network YouTube page. Chris Meaney hanging out with you. Appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with me as well. We got a little bit to get to here on the program. We are going to take a look at my way too early 2023-2024 fantasy football rankings. Top 12. I actually last night went and did my top 10 or top 12 quarterbacks, top 40 wide receivers, and top 24 running backs. A lot's going to change, of course, the draft and free agency. I think today I'm just going to narrow it down to the top 12 overall. We'll talk about a couple players that missed the cut, my reasoning behind some of these picks as well. Shout out to Jeff Ratcliffe, who has his way too early fantasy football rankings over at ftnfantasy.com for free as well. We do have rankings and projections for you crazies that have your fantasy football championship week 18. I know there are some people out there that are playing. It's a wild week as usual. That's why I usually try to wrap up your fantasy football season week 17. And I hope you guys were able to win a couple championships, at least one in fantasy football. We will dive into the week. We'll take a look at the entire slate here. Some picks against the spread, some totals, some teasers. We have a parlay. We have some props, a couple touchdown calls as well. We'll try to filter through who we think will make the playoffs and who won't make the playoffs. So we'll just get right into it. I try to focus on my props for meaningful games. There's a couple games that are really hard to handicap. Like, for example, Cleveland and Cincinnati. I still don't even know for sure if the Bengals are going to roll out a lot of their starters. We know that Cleveland really doesn't have a whole lot to play for. They can't move up. They can't move down. I think this is an opportunity for Kevin Stefanski and the boys to rest some of their players. Could see a lot of Pierre Strong this week. Don't expect to see Joe Flacco. Here we are, January 5th, 2024. Joe Flacco is getting rested. Don't want to risk the injury to Joe Flacco. The Cleveland Browns NFL record, 4 different starting quarterbacks this season. Nobody's ever done that and made the playoffs. So kudos to Stefanski. I think probably, Dan Campbell is probably going to get a lot of love for Coach of the Year. But I would say that what Cleveland's done this season without Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper's missed a lot of time, Deshaun Watson and Joe Flacco and multiple other different quarterbacks that suited up for them this season. Pretty impressive stuff. So, and also Detroit and Minnie's a little bit tough to handicap as well. I do believe that Dan Campbell is going to roll out a lot of his starters. Maybe he scales back in the second half. They can move up to the 2 spot. Unlikely, even though the Cowboys have been atrocious on the road. I do expect them to take care of business and win against Washington. So there's a chance maybe he plays the starters to start the game, and then in the second half, he's not playing a whole lot of Gibbs or Amon-Ra, Laporta, and Jared Goff. So there's a few. The Rams are not going to play a lot of their starters. Puka Nacua is going to get out there and get his touches. He's just a handful of yards away from having the most receiving yards for a rookie. You're not going to see Cooper Kupp. You're not going to see Kyron Williams or Matthew Stafford. Not going to see anybody really on the San Fran side of things as well. Maybe Elijah Mitchell, but not even sold that he's going to play. Could be Mason. So there's a lot of different moving pieces. It's why you don't play Fantasy Football Championship come week 18. But of course, if you have any questions at all, updated rankings and projections are going to be live over at ftnfantasy.com. We'll be with you tomorrow on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio Channel 87 from 9 to 11 Eastern with myself, Jake Seeley, and Lauren Carpenter. That's in the morning, and we'll dive into all that stuff as well. 2 Saturday games. So I think I want to start here with just some props that I like for this weekend. And again, I am focusing in on either teams that have something to play for or teams that haven't had anything to play for weeks, and I don't expect any changes. If you've been following along on the show over the past few weeks, I've been really picking on this Eagles rush defense and talking a lot about it over the past couple of weeks. We have hit on some running backs that had low numbers because they went up against Philly, and the assumption is that this rush defense is good. From week 1 to week 10, it was the best in football. They had only allowed 66 rushing yards per game, but from week 11 to week 17, 150 rushing yards per game. Only Seattle allowing more rushing yards per game than the Eagles since week 11 when they returned to the field after their bye. We talked about Kenneth Walker on the low rushing total that he had, and he cruised past that. We talked about Saquon, and he cruised past that. We talked about James Conner last week, and he cruised past his rushing prop as well. We have Saquon here at 59.5 rushing yards. He had 80 rushing yards against the Eagles in week 16 on 23 carries. if you look at the last 6 games, 3 duds and 3 good games. The 3 good games came against garbage teams. Maybe the Eagles aren't garbage, but listen, their defense doesn't look great. And he did it against Washington, and he did it against the Packers, who I think have some issues on the ground as well. That's why we have Khalil Herbert also on this list. I know he popped up late last night on the injury report with a back injury, so maybe you wait this one out. It's not like the lines are going to change. We jumped all over this in our bet tracker. It was 28.5 heading into last week, and Deontay Foreman didn't play in week 16 for a personal reason, and he was inactive in week 17. This backfield was Khalil Herbert's, and the line didn't change a whole lot. When it was announced that Foreman was not going to play in that game, Herbert still had a rushing yard prop at around 30, 31, and 32. So it didn't move a whole lot. His last 2 games, he's had all the work. 20 for 112 and 18 for 124 last week against a Falcons team that's been pretty good against the run all year long. So the last 2 games for Khalil Herbert, 38 carries, over 230 rushing yards, got a touchdown in each one of those games. The Packers inside the top 10 in rushing yards allowed per carry, and fantasy points to running backs. And the Bears are playing really good football at the moment. They're playing great defense. They're racking up a ton of sacks. They're getting some picks, coming off a game with 4 interceptions. The defense has played fantastic, and Justin Fields has been playing really good as well and playing for his job in Chicago. And it's a conversation. It's going to be a hot topic all off season long. What happens here with Justin Fields? Is he going to be a member of the Chicago Bears, or is he going to get traded? Right? It's a fascinating topic to really discuss. I think he's had a pretty good year. We've seen improvements from him. I know the completion percentage is only up a touch, but the yardage, they got him a weapon in DJ Moore, and he's looked really good with DJ Moore. Moore's had a career season. Moore is fighting for him. Moore said after, he wants it to be he wants it to be Justin Fields. So he's clearly won over the locker room. Justin Fields has. I mean, if you win over the wide receiver 1 in your team, you've also won over some other pieces. But if the package to trade that 1 is more than, the package for Carolina to move up to get Bryce Young, that's super appealing. Get a guy, Caleb Williams, who may be the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. It's possible. I do believe some of that. I also believe that maybe he won't live up to expectations. There's a lot of what ifs there. Will he be better than Justin Fields 3-4 years into his NFL career at this point? It's possible. He's certainly a better quarterback, a pocket passer, maybe a decision maker. But Fields is extremely dynamic. And to think about what you can get too. Like, if you can get all of those pieces, still maybe draft a Marvin Harrison. So you have Fields, you have Marv, you have DJ Moore, you have probably a couple other pieces that you're going to get in a trade like that. A couple seconds. This is a team that really improved in the offseason defensively with some skilled players. And ever since they acquired Sweat from Washington, this has been a really good defense, arguably the best rush defense in all of football, and a top 5 unit in terms of EPA over the last 10 weeks. It's been a really good squad. Anyways, I think Herbert, Fields, and DJ Moore are going to show up this week and make Packers fans sweat. I got DJ Moore here over 66.5. I know Jair Alexander is going to return here. I just don't really care about Jair. DJ Moore, 12 games with Justin Fields, using our splits tools over at ftnfantasy.com, averaging 8.4 targets, 6 grabs, and 90 receiving yards. In 4 games without him, 7 targets, 5 grabs, and just 52 receiving yards. He averaged 16.7 fantasy points per game in a half-point setting. That would be wide receiver 4 if he was able to do that over the full course of the season. And we have a large sample size of him with 12 games. Just those other 4 without Fields, you've got to imagine he's around this number. And the 16.7, again, wide receiver 4 behind Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, and Keenan Allen. A big play guy, we all know that, and he's just been really good this year with Justin Fields. Mike Evans up at the top at 61.5 receiving yards. Again, a team playing for something. Carolina not playing for something. Got it shut out last week against the Jaguars. What? The Carolina pass defense has been good. We've been talking about that over the past couple weeks as well. They're right there actually with Cleveland and Baltimore in terms of eliminating yards through the air. Teams are certainly running all over Carolina. And I'm sure they're going to use a whole lot of Rashad White here, a win, and they win the NFC South. But Mike Evans has been very consistent this season. He lit them up in week 13 to the tune of 12 targets, 7 grabs, and 162 yards. He's topped 61 receiving yards in 6 of his last 9 games. So I'm taking the over on Mike Evans as well. It's 61.5. I've seen a lot from Chris Godwin over the past couple weeks as well. And it is a matchup where you can run all over Carolina, but I think Evans is going to get his. Also like him to find the end zone. Same sort of deal here with DK Metcalf. The matchup is also pretty good. Arizona's second highest quarterback completion percentage against at 69%, just behind the Vikings. 7.6 yards per attempt. It's the 6th most. 4th most passing yards. Missed the game earlier against Arizona, but he does have 70-plus receiving yards in 5 of his last 8 games, and he topped the century mark in his last game. So liking the alpha wide receivers in must-win situations this week for Mike Evans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and DK Metcalf and the Seattle Seahawks. And then you see Brandon Cooks here, and I'm all for CeeDee Lamb. I think he tops 100 yards. His receiving yard prop, I think, is 93. His catch prop is 6.5. He probably ends up with another 8 or 9 grabs and 100-plus receiving yards. But I also like Brandon Cooks here at 39.5. Receiving yards at -110. Again, use the prop shop to get the best possible numbers. Save yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of cash. Averaging 41 yards per game on the season, 12.9 yards per catch, 40-plus yards in 5 of his last 8 games, 60 yards last week against the soft pass defense in Detroit, and 72 in week 12 in this very same matchup against Washington. That one, of course, came at home. The splits are for real with Dallas. Certainly Dak, they're significant if you take a look at the home and away. 8 games at home, 8 games on the road, like 700 fewer yards on the road. The touchdowns to interception ratio sparkling in Dallas, not so much on the road. The completion percentage is like 70 plus to low 60s, but this is Washington after all. This team cannot stop anybody through the air. League high 3,000 yards to wide receivers, 25 touchdowns to wideouts, the second most behind the Eagles, and the 3rd most passing yards allowed as well. So a really good spot for Brandon Cooks and, of course, Dallas to get the job done and punch their ticket to home field advantage as well. Deesh in the house, late, but here. Welcome to week 18. Unfortunately, got a ship in my family league, week 18. So yeah, there are some people out there that are playing week 18, and it's really tough. I would try to avoid, as we take a look at the schedule, and I got some picks against the spread and some touchdown stuff here. As we take a look at the schedule, some lines have changed. For my pick 'em pool, there's another week left. I'm going to try to finish this thing strong. We just tweeted over at ftnfantasy.com the picks for the week as well. We've had a pretty solid week, so I can't complain with the money line stuff. It does get a little weird here at this time of the year, but I wanted to roll through all my picks, money line picks and picks against the spread here on the season. 169 and 87. Rapid fire through the money line stuff here for me: Pittsburgh, Houston, Detroit, New Orleans, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, New England, San Francisco, Kansas City, Seattle, the Raiders, the Eagles. I got the Bears. And we all have the Bears over at FTN Fantasy. Ratcliffe, Randall, Lochner, Pfeiffer. I'm actually surprised. I thought it'd be maybe the only one here on Chicago, Dallas, and then we're all on Buffalo as well to beat Miami. As for maybe your own league that you're playing, you got some questions about certain guys, of course, you can leave them here in the comment section, always circling back on these videos. You can reach out on X at Chris Meaney. But I think Detroit will. I kind of have this feeling that maybe Minnesota covers. Like, I'm still not locked into Detroit -3.5. I think that the Lions win the game. I think Campbell wants to win the game. The possibility of maybe getting that 2 seed. He can't help himself either. He's going for it all the time on 4th down, which, by the way, I think, I love that he did it. He told his team before they marched up the field, he said, listen, we're going to march up the field. We're going to score a touchdown. We're going to go for 2. And I still think it was on the refs. I think maybe it was on Detroit not hearing the right name called. But how can you do that in the moment? Do you even hear that? The crowd noise. I think it was a massive screw job by the refs. Detroit should have won that game. In my opinion, they won that game, right? Nonetheless, Dallas has the W, but I liked Campbell talking about it after, I forget on the radio station. Just say it. Just say what you want to say. It was a bonehead play, yada, yada, yada. Maybe they don't go for it if it was marched back outside of the 10. Maybe in hindsight, you say, all right, kick the extra point, go to overtime. Campbell can't help himself. I'm sure he's going to play some of his starters here. Just the quarterback play has been so brutal in Minnesota. Mullins doesn't care. He's chucking it all over the field. They went to Hall last week, and then the Mullins in the second half. Who's going to be the quarterback to finish the play, finish the season? Not going to be able to really run on Detroit, but I think there's a possibility of some sort of backdoor cover. But I think the Lions win the football game. I think the Saints win the football game as well. Of course, they need some help. They need Tampa Bay to lose. If they win and Tampa Bay loses to Carolina, they get division. If Tampa Bay loses and the Falcons beat the Saints, they actually get the division. But if the Bucs beat the Panthers this week, in order for the Saints to get in, they would need a loss by Seattle against Arizona, and they would also need a loss by Green Bay against Chicago. So they really do need some help. But I think that they're playing really good football at the moment. Derek Carr has been solid over the past 3 weeks. The defense has improved over the past couple weeks. Getting some guys back healthy has helped them out. And I really like where New Orleans is at compared to where Atlanta is at this point of the season. But I don't think we should be surprised if anything happens here. Week 18 get a little bit wacky. But I like the Saints to win. I like them to cover that 3. I'd say they win by like 4 or 5 points. Divisional game, it could be pretty tight. But I'm going to lean with New Orleans here in the better quarterback play and a team showing me a whole lot. This one here, like I said, it's pretty hard to handicap. I would say maybe even Cleveland covers. I think it's moved to like 7.5. I don't think the Browns are going to play a lot of their players. And on the other side, Cincinnati, like, whatever. Like, who like, is Jamar Chase going to? What's the point of rolling out Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? These guys have been playing through injuries for a big chunk of the season. Joe Mixon hasn't showed us a whole lot. An opportunity maybe to get a little bit more Chase Brown in their lives, see what they have in the young running back. But this one's a really tough one. I picked Cincy on the money line. I think Cleveland maybe can keep this within a touchdown because Cincinnati is just not overwhelming on offense. Jacksonville and Tennessee. I mean, I would have the 5.5 earlier in the week, something to jump on for sure. Vrabel comes out and, talks, I want an effing win and I hate losing and yada, yada. That's nice to say. And you can sit here and say Vrabel's going to get his guys going, and he will. He always does. He's a great coach, but it's all about the personnel. But I still think that this is a field goal game. This is one where Jacksonville fans are going to sweat this thing out. Trevor Lawrence is a game time decision. Christian Kirk is a game time, according to reports. Man, he hasn't had a great career against Tennessee either. This is a team kind of spiraling, I would say, but a win and they do get the division. I'd say that they win the football game on the road, but this isn't going to be an easy one. If you miss the 5.5, I would still lean with the points here in the plus 3.5. I think we'll see some massive changes in Tennessee in the offseason, right? I mean, clearly they moved on from they moved to Will Levis. Derrick Henry, is he on the squad? Is Vrabel even the coach, right? It's a lot of, and it's not that he's a bad coach, but maybe he wants to move on himself. Maybe it's a thing where they part ways. Maybe he's in New England next year. This is all a bunch of different possibilities. Maybe the Chargers want him. We'll see what happens there. Tampa and Carolina. This line has moved. I think it was plus 5.5, plus 6 earlier. I'd say the Bucs win this one again. I would say they win by a touchdown. It could be close midway through the game. Divisional game. Panthers' pass defense has been good, but it's a team that scored 0 points last week. 0. I just don't know how they're going to be able to move the ball. They haven't really moved the ball in offense all year. Can they play spoiler? Baker's not 100%, dealing with some rib injuries. He's going to power through. They should be able to run on Carolina. Hit up on Mike Evans and Godwin and company. So I'm going to take Tampa here. I don't think that there's going to be an upset, but my goodness, imagine if there is, and even that Saints and Falcons game goes Atlanta's way, we could actually see a Philly and Atlanta matchup. This is all kinds of different possibilities here. This could be New England's last game, or New England's last game. It will be their last game of the season. It could be Bill Belichick's last game as a Patriot head coach. It's I'd say very likely. New England has owned the Jets over the past few years, and I expect them to win this game at home for Bill. The Jets haven't really shown us a whole lot. It's just going to be a low-scoring game. Breece Hall and Zeke just running into the line of scrimmage, and a bunch of catches probably for those guys and a bunch of dump-offs. But we'll say New England wins this game at home by a field goal. The Rams and the Niners, again, another tough one to handicap. I think this line has moved. Let me see if I can get the latest here for you guys. Ultimately, we're seeing teams rest on both sides. I saw some rumblings on Twitter about why would the Rams, rest No, it's still stayed true here at 4. Why would the Rams rest their players? They're not locked into the 6 seed. Wouldn't you want the 6 seed so you could potentially avoid the Niners in that second round matchup? I don't think it matters. I think it's just more important. Like, if you're a football team, yeah, it's one thing to say, we want to avoid the Niners until maybe the NFC Championship game, but it's also one thing to say that, and I think this is more important, have a healthy squad heading into the playoffs. You're not going to risk Kyron. You're not going to risk Puka Nakua, to the extent they're going to get him his yardage there with Carson Wentz. It's Carson Wentz versus Sam Darnold. Like, it's big picture here at hand, right? We understand why the Niners are resting. They got the 1 seed locked up. They're not moving them down. They're even going to have the bye, but there's no point of rolling out these guys. And for the Rams, I don't think there's a point either. I really like where this Rams team is at. I've said it a couple times. We had 5-1 for them to make the playoffs as a wild card squad a couple weeks ago. A little bit of a sprinkle at 70-1 for them to win the Super Bowl. I think that they can go toe to toe with anybody on offense. I think that they can go in and beat Dallas. I know that Dallas beat them at home, but it was very different Rams team at that point of the season. And I think that they can go in and beat Detroit. And that would be a fun matchup. That's the one I'd like to see. I'd like to see Stafford go into Detroit against his former squad and maybe bounce the Lions. And I just, like I said, I think they go toe-to-toe with anybody on offense. The defense has some questions, but we have a lot of questions about a few defensive squads inside the NFC, don't we? I'm not even totally sold on Dallas's defense. When they get up in games, it can certainly bring some pressure, and it's hard to come back on them. But Detroit has some issues in the secondary. The Eagles have a ton of issues. The Bucs have had issues in their secondary for a big chunk of the season. And those teams that squeak in as well, like the Packers, the Seahawks, are very vulnerable through the air and on the ground. Anyways, I understand why McVay is not rolling out his pieces. I think San Fran still wins the game. I think that, it's at home and their backups are probably better than the Rams backups. If this moves to 5.5, 6, I would lean with the Rams covering it, but I'd say San Fran is the play there. We could see, some Rolls Royce Freeman, Ronnie Williams, Rivers, a little bit of Mason. Some randomness there on both teams in that game. Same sort of deal here with Kansas City and the Chargers. I can't pick the Chargers minus 3.5 against anybody. You kidding me? I don't care. KC's backups got to be better than the players that the Chargers are rolling out there. Easton Stick has had some decent moments. Didn't look great last week. We're going to see Blaine Gabbert there for KC, where we shouldn't see Pacheco or Travis Kelce or Rasheed Rice. We shouldn't see any of those guys. Maybe a little Noah Gray in your life when it comes to DFS or some props. I'm definitely going to have some props in the bet tracker, probably late Saturday night or early Sunday morning, and trying to find some edges on some backup players. It's usually when I go digging late at night for the props. Who says, good things can't happen past 2 a.m.? I don't know. A couple bats, a little glass of vino, and I'm searching for props. So I'll do the same thing over at FTN bets.com this weekend. I like the Seahawks, but I think the Cardinals are going to keep things close. I have Seattle on the money line. I'm willing to just pay a little bit of the juice for them to win the game. Arizona is clearly battling and fighting. Kyler Murray said some great things to say about Jonathan Gannon and vice versa. Gannon's had some great things to say about Kyler, said he's the future quarterback. He's their guy. So it sounds like they're going to roll with him. Who knows? Things could change. But Kyler and Arizona played really good last week. Just a fantastic game against the Birds. They ran all over them. They threw all over them as well. And a divisional game with Seattle on the road. Seattle's had some issues stopping the run. James Conner's been really good over the past couple of weeks. A nice game from Michael Wilson last week. Trey McBride's a handful. But I think Seattle will find a way to win the game there. Denver and Las Vegas is an easy one for me. I'm going to side with the Raiders. I think they could probably win by a touchdown. They're just a team that's showing me a whole lot. They're playing for their coach, and I don't know if the Broncos are playing for theirs. It's really that simple. Zamir White, Josh Jacobs, doesn't matter if Jacobs plays or not. I look at this Las Vegas team and I just see a defense that has really come together. I know last week a bit of a dud performance from them, but they had 5 sacks against Meaney in week 14. They had 3 and four fumble recoveries and 2 touchdowns as a defense against the Chargers. We saw that one, that 63-21 on primetime. What a blowout. That was the last kick there for Staley. Kansas City, they had 4 sacks, a pick, a fumble recovery, and 2 defensive touchdowns as well. This defense is playing really good. And again, they are fighting for their coach. You heard Devontae Adams in the press conference. He wants Pierce. Pierce is the type of guy he wants to play for. And the Raiders have just changed their tune as a squad since they fired Josh McDaniels. So I like them quite a bit. It's one of my favorite picks of the week, -2.5. Again, the Broncos, Sean Payton, nobody's buying what he's selling. And he never liked Russ. We know this. All the reports are leaking out now. And he said that Stidham gives him a better chance to win. That's just bogus. It's such a BS comment. Nobody can take that seriously at all. I watched Stidham last week. I thought he was awful. I thought he was brutal. So, yeah. Next, Philly and the Giants. I like the Giants to cover. I mean, call me an Eagles homer, but if you've been watching the NFL betting show, and again this week with myself, Abby Labar, and Mike Randall, I've been picking on this Eagles team for weeks. Ever since the Bills win, had them beat the Bills, had the Niners, had the Seahawks. This is spreads. Seahawks cover. We had the Giants in the +13 Christmas Day, and we had Arizona at +12 as well. And I'm going right back to them this week. The Eagles are going to play their guys. I don't think Darius Slay is going to play. I don't think Devontae Smith is going to play. These guys weren't at practice this week. I really like a lot of the comments from A.J. Brown. People, the Philly media or other people on social media just giving it to A.J. Brown. He wants out of Philly. He's not happy. He's frustrated. Everybody's frustrated. I really liked his comments yesterday. He said he was going to speak to the media, and he spoke to the media. And he said it's the players, it's not the coaches. Johnson's getting some heat for some of his play calling, and I get it. Quarterback draws, 2nd and 20, 1st and 20. What are you doing? But AJ had some really nice things to say about Nick Sirianni, and I'm sure that the players and the coaches, they like to hear that. Maybe that's a good thing. They can turn the corner here. Again, AJ saying that a couple weeks ago, if you remember, like that Hail Mary throw, and there's like a pick at the end of the game. They didn't need to do that. They could have just, couple out routes. They had some time on the clock. It's a couple timeouts. They could have made that work and get up the field, maybe kick a game-winning field goal, or maybe it was a game-tying field goal. And Nick Sirianni said after the game that, he thought they'd take a shot down the field and get a flag. And a lot of people are like, what? You loser. What are you doing? Why would you do that? And AJ said that was on them, Hurts and them. Hurts and AJ, it was just like kind of a change at the line of scrimmage, and they wanted to take a shot. So that was them and the coaching staff sticking up for the players. So I don't know, man. Like, I thought that was AJ's a pretty decent leader. I think he's going to show up this week. But the truth is the Eagles are still having massive issues stopping the running game, giving up big plays through the air. And the offense is still struggling inside the red zone. They've moved the ball pretty well over the past couple of weeks, but they have struggled inside the red zone. I think that this is going to be another tight game. I think they squeak it out. But it's also the possibility that they rest some guys in the second half of the game. If they scoreboard watch and they see the Cowboys that are up big, maybe they're not playing AJ, Goddard, Swift, and Hurts in the second half of that game. But I think it's going to be a tight football game. It was certainly a couple weeks ago. The Bears and the Packers, I like the Bears to cover. I like the Bears to squeak out a W. I have been hard on Jordan Love. He's been fantastic, right? Probably deserve a Pro Bowl nod. I know the Pro Bowl nod's it's just all a popularity contest, but Jordan Love's been really good. Finishes a borderline top 5 quarterback in fantasy, like Jaden Reed. Looks like, most of the Packers wide receivers are healthy. They've been practicing this week, which is a great sign. But I just like where Chicago's at defensively. I like where Fields is at as well. They're running the football. You can run on Green Bay. We've been picking on the Packers over the past couple of weeks. After they beat KC, they were big favorites against the Giants. We were on that. We were on the Panthers to cover as well. So that's my upset of the week here is Chicago +3. Also like Washington +13. It's really, Dallas was in this spot last week or last year. It was Sam Howell's first start on the road, and Howell and the Commanders won that game. And there was some Dak played up until, early parts of the fourth quarter in that game. So there was no real excuses when it comes to, Dak resting or anything like that. But, they'll do enough to win the game. But I think Washington kind of keeps this close. There's always the threat of a backdoor cover late in the game. We've seen that a couple times with Sam Howell and company. Brian Robinson returned last week, looked decent on the ground. I'll just give you the splits here because I kind of glossed over them early. But these are the Dak splits. Home, 8 games, quarterback rating, 120, completion percentage, 73, 2,400 passing yards, 308 per game, 22 touchdowns, 3 picks, 8.6 yards per attempt. On the road, 8 games, 87.1 quarterback rating. 63% completion rate. So 73 to 63, 1,700 yards, 700 fewer, 220 passing yards per game compared to 308, 6.6 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, and 5 picks. And I get it, played Buffalo, played Miami. There's some tough opponents there on the road. You know what? Also played Arizona this year on the road. Also played the Chargers this year on the road. Okay game, from a complete percentage, he was fine, but he only tossed 1 touchdown. Also had a game against the Niners and a game against the Giants earlier in the year where he didn't have to do a whole lot. So some of those numbers are, you take it with a grain of salt, but if you look at the overall past couple of years, there's been a difference in the home and away splits. Divisional game, maybe Washington trying to play spoiler here. And then Buffalo and Miami, the game of the week, Sunday Night Football. The Bills win and they get the division, and Miami drops down and they play the Chiefs in the opening round. Also, the Bills could just clinch before this game even happens. But if the Steelers win on Saturday, the Steelers are not on this board. Yeah, so we're missing a couple games, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and we're missing Houston and Tennessee. I like Pittsburgh. I think the Ravens could keep this close. The +4, I don't mind. They are resting their players in Baltimore and Harbaugh and company. They've always been decent in the preseason with backups. Divisional rival. They definitely hate the Steelers. They want the Steelers to get in. They could, still try to win this game and get them out. But I think Pittsburgh wins, and Mason Rudolph's given them a little bit of a spark offensively. But if the Pittsburgh Steelers win and the Jags win, then Buffalo really does need to win that game. If those two teams lose, then the Bills could still get in despite the loss. But I'm on. I'll switch over here to the picks that I like here, and the most that I will be betting. And again, I'm trying to just stay clear of chaos, just trying to pick some teams that need W's and some teams that have been, just awful for weeks and nothing will really change. So I talked about the Raiders, the Giants +5.5, Washington +13, Buffalo on the money line, Seattle on the money line. My upset is Chicago at +140. We have the Jets and the Pats at under 30.5. It's a very low number. I just don't think we'll see a whole lot offensively from those two squads. Buffalo on Miami, 48.5. It could turn out to some sort of shootout. The reason I'm on the Bills is, one, Josh Allen has owned Miami over the course of his career. He's had at least 2 passing touchdowns in every single game against them. He's also -108 for 2 passing touchdowns, which is a prop that I definitely like. Over the past couple weeks, it's been bad for Josh Allen. I think he has 3 touchdowns and maybe 3 picks over the last 7 weeks. Bryce Young is the only guy that has a lower quarterback completion percentage than Josh Allen. They've turned it over to the run game since Joe Brady has taken over. That's part of it. Allen hasn't been asked to do as much as he has in the past. But earlier in the season, 320 and 4 touchdowns. In fact, the last 2 games against Miami, he's thrown 4 passing touchdowns. He's had at least 300 passing yards and 3 straight against them, 400 in a game last year against Miami. That was actually a loss, but they ran a ton of plays on offense, and it was just a weird game. But overall, this guy's really owned Miami. He's got a couple 400-yard games. He's got a couple other 300-yard games. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games at least 3 passing touchdowns in every game, 2 passing touchdowns. And I wonder just how healthy Miami is. Is Jalen Waddle playing? We know that Bradley Chubb isn't playing. There's some issues in the secondary right now. Raheem Mostert hasn't practiced. He didn't play last week. Maybe they're just looking ahead to this game. I definitely know that they want to win the game. Like having the number 2 seed, avoiding Kansas City, having the home field advantage is significant, right? Miami's a tough place to play, right? They built the stadium strategically so the sun just shines on the road bench and you're just sweating it out all the time. Like it's a reason that some teams go into Miami and they struggle. I like Buffalo to win the game. I like them to win the game. It should be a tight one. I think it could blow out and be a high-scoring affair. I'm going to side with the Bills here. I got the money line parlay with Seattle, Tampa, New Orleans, and Buffalo at +542. I got a 4.5 point teaser here. Houston +3.5, Chicago +7.5, the Giants at +9.5, and the Cardinals at +7.5. Teams that I don't think will lose. I don't think Seattle will lose. I don't think that Tampa Bay will lose, and I don't think the Saints will lose. So those are 3 teams all fighting for something, and I think that they'll be able to pull out a W. And I got the under between Jacksonville and Tennessee because of some of the questions on offense with Trevor Lawrence and company. Plus, the offense in Tennessee hasn't really shown us a whole lot there either. Jacksonville's had some issues, man, through the air. There's back-to-back weeks there against Joe Flacco and Jake Browning. They allowed 64 points. Those guys had massive days, but last week the defense was good, but how good? Because it was up against Bryce Young. So those are the picks. What do we got here? We got a couple questions. Yeah, I cut the Browns D to play the Pats D. It's something that you got to do. I totally get it. Disgusted. You all picking the Bears as a Packers fan. I know. I'm really surprised that we all picked them. I thought it would be alone on that pick. Yes, Fields this week over Kyler's 6-point. It doesn't really change things for me. I like Fields the way that he's playing football. He's running around a whole lot. And I think he's got a lot to prove. I think that this is a significant game for him. And I also think it's as simple as if he goes into Green Bay and bounces a division rival, and that's like it's maybe enough for the Bears organization, right? I know he's had he's taken some shots at your Packers. There's nothing else to do there but watch football and yada yada. But I'm definitely in on Justin Fields this week. Tom in the house, I need to pick winners for week 18. What underdog teams can win outright? I see the Bears and the Cards. Yeah, just kind of went over some of that, Tom. I think Chicago and Arizona are certainly live dogs. Both of those teams, I feel a little bit better about Chicago. But yeah, I mean, both, 3-point favorites and not even really considered a massive upset. Divisional games get certainly weird, but Chicago has shown me a lot on defense over the past little bit. Daily Handle, good afternoon, Means, and everybody here in the house. We're just wrapping up. Do you like Arizona Saints and the Bears in a 3-game, 7.5 teaser? Yeah, I do. I think, just showing you that board there. I know you probably had that question before I showed you that, the teaser here. By the way, I think Houston wins the game against the Indianapolis Colts, so that should be a good one. But yeah, the teaser here with Chicago and Arizona keeping this thing, within 2 scores, I think is where my head's at. Houston not losing by more than a field goal. Chicago keeping this a 2-score game. The Giants keeping this, a 2-score game, and then Arizona as well. It's kind of on the cusp as like a 2-point conversion there. Playing Ridley over Puka, sitting concerns, last horrible week 18 question. Yeah, I think Ridley over Puka makes a whole lot of sense. Mitchell, Mason, if Kamara is out. I think it's just a matter of really waiting if there's any more news on Elijah Mitchell. My gut says that Mitchell's going to get a little bit of run early, and then they're going to ease off of him. Of course, it's CMC, but Mitchell's a pretty decent backup. And we saw last week 17 for 80 and a touchdown last year before CMC. And even down the stretch of the season, maybe scaling back a little bit from CMC, Elijah Mitchell had some good games. I think it's more important for Shanahan and company to keep him healthy, but he's missed practice this week just to an illness. That's a tough one. I'd say if Mitchell is active, I would just roll with him. Maybe he does enough early in the game. Maybe he scores a touchdown early in the first half, and maybe it's a little bit more Mason in the second half. I mean, my head says that, the Niners should just roll with Mason and give him a ton of run because why not? But I think that Mitchell has the higher ceiling there. A couple other things I think that I have here on the way out. We just rolled through some of the props, and I think my mouse is frozen. So that's good. Mouse is frozen. We just I can't show you the props. I can't show you All right, are we back? We back here? Anybody still hanging around? We had some technical issues here. If you guys can hear me, give me a heads up. All right, I'm back. Oh my goodness, we are back. That was pretty rough. That was pretty rough. We we just lost everything. You guys can hear me, so that's all good. We're back here. You can see me as well. We're back. I don't know what happened. The computer just crashed on me, and we're back. We can hear you, Prince. All right, welcome back in. We were just gonna wrap up all the picks and everything. So a little bit flustered there. You can hear me. All right, we're good to go. We're back. All good here. I was just about to go over my top 12 way too early rankings, and the world said, "No, we don't need them. It's January 5th. What are we doing here?" So we're back. Yeah, no problem. I don't think there's any other questions. No problem there, Deesh. Good luck in your week 18 matchup there. So we're back. We're ready to go. If some people are just joining and jumping in, this is what I had for some props for the weekend. I kind of went through my analysis on that already, so you can go back and watch that. But we are on Saquon over rushing yards, Mike Evans over receiving yards, DK Metcalf over receiving yards, DJ Moore receiving yards, Khalil Herbert over rushing yards, and Brandon Cooks receiving yards as well. And we had some picks against the spread and some props here for you guys for a wacky, wild week 18. So I did have a couple other things before we get to the way too early rankings. So for Saturday, some of these lines have changed a little bit. You know, the 69.5, you may not be able to get that. Actually, definitely can't get that anymore. But over 74.5 receiving yards and over 5.5 grabs, I think, CJ Stroud and company. I think that offensively they should be able to throw on the Colts here. And I definitely like Nico Collins here. The 5.5 is plus money. I think that they'll lean on him quite a bit. And then Michael Pittman as well, just taking the two alpha wide receivers in this game. Michael Pittman over 75.5 receiving yards, Nico Collins at over 74.5 receiving yards. Those numbers are pretty big. And then there's George Pickens. I mean, how could you not take this at 47.5, considering what he's done over the past couple of weeks? It's been a real nice showing from him since they, went to Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph has been pretty good over the past couple of weeks. And for George Pickens, he's got 15 targets, 11 grabs, and over 300 receiving yards, 195 and 131 over the past couple of weeks. And with the Ravens resting some guys and the big playability that he has, it really just takes a catch or two for George Pickens to get to that number. This is what I had for some touchdowns here. Some of these are chalky. Some of these aren't fantastic odds, but these are guys that I think will find the end zone this week. Mike Evans, Kenneth Walker, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, should be leaned on in this game, at least in the first half. Juwan Johnson, the Eagles should run the ball, but A.J. Brown there. Juwan Johnson, we've hit this in the past couple of weeks, 3 straight weeks with a touchdown. We had, I think, 6-1 back-to-back weeks. Last week was maybe plus 480. This week, I think, is plus 280. But Juwan Johnson's getting some love inside the red zone, and they're not turning it over to Taysom Hill inside the red zone as often as they were midway through the year. Khalil Herbert, Brandon Cooks, and then Josh Allen. I mean, Josh Allen's been has been running one in consistently over the past few weeks, but I also like him to throw 2 touchdowns. As I said earlier before I got cut off, he's had 2 passing touchdowns in every game in his career against Miami, and he's minus 109. There was a time where the 2 touchdowns were automatic for Josh. The past couple of weeks haven't been as automatic, clearly. It's like 3 touchdowns and 3 or 4 picks, not a game with 2. But this one could shoot out, and he could lean on his arm a little bit. Okay, I think it's time to get to the way too early 2023-2024 fantasy football rankings in a half-point setting. Up at the top, no surprises, Christian McCaffrey. He's the consensus number 1. I do believe across the board for most people, over 100 fantasy points than the next closest running back this season. A league high 1,459 rushing yards and 2,000 total yards, 21 touchdowns, 5.4 yards per carry, at least a touchdown in 13 of his 16 games. Tyreek Hill is number 2 for me, the first wide receiver off the board. Proved last year's 1,700-yard season with Tua wasn't a fluke, as he doubled down with another 1,700 yards, and he missed a game Cheetah code topped all wideouts in yards, a healthy 15.3 yards per catch, nearly 11 targets per game. CeeDee Lamb has moved up to wide receiver 2, 19.2 fantasy points per game and a half point setting, just a touch behind Tyreek Hill, a league high 168 targets and 122 grabs through 17 weeks, a healthy 29% target share, 36% air yard share, and a 34% target share since week 8. And he led all wide receivers in yards. It's all about usage. I think this is a fair price for CeeDee Lamb as wide receiver 2. Justin Jefferson here as wide receiver 3. Pick number 4. JJ on his way to a top finish again without an injury to him and his quarterback, Kirk Cousins. Questions moving forward in Minnesota. Who's going to be the quarterback? But still an alpha wide receiver, limited to half a season and still flirted with 1,000 yards. Jamar Chase here next. Missed time with an injury, but so did Joe Burrow. And Chase still finishes a top 10 wide receiver. From week 3 to week 10, he averaged over 100 receiving yards. 3 games of double-digit catches. He still has a massive ceiling. Joe Burrow, you hope that he's healthy. You hope Jamar Chase is healthy next season. Wide receiver 4 and pick number 5. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 5 here and pick number 6. Broke out last year with 13 fantasy points per game, and he topped it this year with 16 fantasy points per game, a career high in targets, catches, yards, and touchdowns. Only CD had more grabs through 17 weeks than Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th among wide receivers in points per game. Dude's a stud. A.J. Brown, 31% target share, only 2nd in the NFL to Devontae Adams, 5th overall in targets, 3rd in yards. A dip in touchdowns this season compared to last year, but more targets, more catches in year number 2 with Jalen Hurts. Got to remember this 6-week stretch that he had as well. 6 games, at least 120 receiving yards, an NFL record. Kyren Williams is my 2nd running back here in my way too early fantasy football rankings. I have him as RB2. Pick number 8. I see some rankings out there that have him a little bit higher. I just don't feel comfortable taking him as a top 5 pick, but I do have him as a top 2 running back. It looks like the Rams found a diamond in the rough in round 5 of last year's NFL draft, and so did fantasy owners. One of the best waiver wire pickups, a fantasy football playoff MVP, and now a first-round pick, 1,100 rushing yards and 15 total touchdowns in just 12 games, averaged 95 rushing yards per game, racked up 21 touches per game. In the last 6 games, he averaged 21 attempts, 25 touches. He was tied with CMC in fantasy points. It remains to be seen if he can hold up over a full season. He's not the biggest back. He's a 5th-round pick after all, but the way Sean McVay used him, the usage rate, kind of use him like Todd Gurley, catching balls into the backfield, all of the touches, and it's extremely exciting. Jahmyr Gibbs is RB3. The rookie finishes RB7 in fantasy points per game while splitting the backfield for most of the season. A solid 5.4 yards per carry, 1,200 total yards, 52 grabs, 10 total touchdowns. Started to take control of the backfield in the back half of the season. He had double-digit carries in 5 of his last 6 games, just once over his first 4. At the start of the season, it was automatic that Dave Montgomery was going to be the goal line back. It wasn't really the case towards the end of this season, and I just think we'll see more run from him behind a really good offensive line and a good offensive squad. Breece Hall's in here next as RB4 and pick 10. Breece may move up my rankings, and he may move down my rankings. The Jets need a better offensive line, and they need better play at the quarterback position. 75 grabs through 17 weeks was one off the league high, so very valuable in PPR formats. Maybe not as many dump offs if they get better quarterback play. Nearly 1,400 total yards on a brutal football team, an awful offensive squad. First year back after suffering a significant injury, the usage rate ramped up in the second half of the season. Breece Hall still got that explosiveness to his game as well. Puka Nacua is inside my top 12. That's it. He's a top 10 wide receiver for me. Wide receiver 7 here. Our favorite late round target on Mean Streets. And, at least a top 12 wide receiver. You got to have him as a top 12 guy. 4th in yards heading into week 18, over 100 grabs and 1,400 yards as a rookie. Cooper Kupp getting a little bit older, has suffered multiple injuries over the past couple of years. Just one of 9 wide receivers to rack up 1,000 yards in their rookie season since 2015. Puka Nacua is here to stay. In a PPR league, there's no question about this ranking. I just felt a little bit better about him over Garrett Wilson because of the Jets and the offensive line and the question at quarterback. DJ Moore is really close to finishing or to being inside my top 12 here. Deebo Samuel, Brendan Ayuk as well, knocking on the door. I just really like Puka Cup, linked to Sean McVay, terrific route runner, and some great hands there. And then Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson was not in here when I made my initial rankings. I had him as just outside the top 12. You may be surprised to see him inside my top 12 after I labeled him a bust before the rookie season started. It's not on him. It's on the coaching staff. If Arthur Smith sticks around in Atlanta, Bijan's going to fall outside my top 12. If they hire a new head coach, Bijan may even move up to RB2, RB3 here in my rankings. Bijan's a great back, a very high ceiling, showed us that he can catch out of the backfield, explosiveness to his game, but he did finish as an RB20 in points per game, did not return value, saw more Tyler Algier than we needed to see, but really just about Arthur Smith there. So a few guys, like I said, that missed the cut. DJ Moore was one of them. Debo Samuel, Garrett Wilson, Brendan Ayuk. For running backs that were kind of knocking on the door, Jonathan Taylor's one that I considered ahead of Bijan Robinson, but I went with the young running back in Bijan, maybe seeing a little bit more from him. Devon Achane I have as a top 10 running back. We'll dive deeper as we get into the slow days of fantasy football. We'll have some dynasty rankings for you guys, top 12 at each position, some risers, some fallers, players maybe we're not believing into their season, fades, just way too early stuff to kind of get into. But those are the rankings right there. Again, Christian McCaffrey 1, Tyreek Hill 2, CeeDee Lamb 3, Justin Jefferson 4, Jamar Chase 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown 6, AJ Brown 7, Kyron Williams 8, Jahmyr Gibbs 9, Breece Hall 10, Puka Nacua 11, and Bijan Robinson there at 12 and RB5. All right, guys, we're out of here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Appreciate you guys taking the time to hang around. Good luck if you are playing in that wacky Week 18. Enjoy the football. I say that we see the Bucs win the division and the Seahawks grab that last playoff spot. Seattle beats Arizona. Chicago beats Green Bay. On the other side, I think we'll see the Bills win the division. Buffalo does get in. Jags win the division. And I think we see the Texans. CJ Stroud's first primetime game. Buckle up. Should be a good one. Enjoy the football, guys. We'll be back on Monday to talk playoffs. That's right. Playoffs here on Monday. Have a good one. Cheers.